Very happy tonight that you're all able to join, despite being a little bit chilly and us being in, a month of a lockdown. I'm looking forward to some things opening up shortly. I'm sure you all are. But a very important topic and kind of one of the core things that the Urban League does is engaging citizens and City Hall. And this session is more, I'll have a short presentation, but really we're trying to have people chat in breakout rooms about different engagement strategies that they've used to make change at City Hall and how they've worked. So kind of more of providing tips and tricks and success stories, because lots of us are trying to make change in our communities despite COVID and the pandemic. So who better to learn it from than people who have been working the system for the last 5, 10, 20 years in London. Just as we're getting started, I do want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Napawac peoples. As well, we're upriver from the current Indigenous communities of Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Oneida Nation of the Thames. And these folks, have been doing a lot of work in engaging both their communities in civic action, but also trying to make a lot of change that benefits all of Canada and all Canadians. So kudos to a lot of the work that they've been doing and engaging our communities. As well, we strive to foster a welcoming environment in general for all members of the League and the London community. So we do ask that people, act respectful on these calls, and we might have differences of opinion, but we're sharing stories and trying to learn from one another. So that being said, again, very happy to have you guys all joining us for tonight's interactive session. We will just encourage you guys to keep your mics on mute, but feel free to have your video on. And in the breakout rooms, feel free to come off mute and chit chat. We'll put some questions to prompt those breakout rooms. And other than that, I'm going to hop right over into a short presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Start slideshow. Awesome. So I thought just to get us started, and many of you guys are like old hats at this, so I might be telling you stuff that you already know, and feel free to be like, that's not helpful, or put some stuff in the chat if you want to have any comments on it. But I did want to give us kind of a bit of a playing field for what kind of engagement strategies I've used and we have used to try and make change at City Hall. And there's many ways. This is not even going to be close to exhaustive, but these are kind of like the ones that we've used before, both at the League and then also myself in various community activities. So the first thing I always like to cover is what council actually does. And again, you guys know probably very well the different levels of government, but you've got municipal, provincial, and federal, and they're all responsible for different things. This is pulled from the Council Act, but what this is kind of what covers what their role is in the community and how they have to represent the best interests of the municipality and making these policies and making sure things are done ethically and accountably and having accountability. But overall, the main point of councillors is to listen to their community members and ideally represent them. And many of our councillors really do want to do a good job of listening to the community and supporting what the community's interests are. And that's something that we can always encourage citizens doing, is connecting with their councillors to talk about the issues that are happening in their neighborhoods. And that is usually our first kind of point of entry. Generally, if there's an issue in our community, the first thing we say at the League when someone comes to talk to us is, you should really reach out to your councillor and have a conversation, whether it's an email, phone call, a meeting, mostly virtual now, but used to be face-to-face. And we advise people to say like what the topic is about generally, but ideally in your call or your meeting will want to go through more of that in detail. And we always tell people, be ready to have a specific ask. And we're going to have an example a little bit later from Woodfield, but they have a very specific ask, and that makes the conversation, I think, go a lot smoother, because the councillor, they need to understand what they're trying to do to help you. And that is easy if they have like a specific ask with information. And I'll talk a little bit more about asks in a bit, but that's kind of our first step. And if the councillor doesn't know a lot about your issue, they'll usually try to connect you with city staff, who then can, have a further discussion. But that's always kind of a first point of entry, and it's their job. So that's the first thing we recommend. And then another one, this is a very, I'd say, low touch point, but it's GetInvolved.ca, which again, many of you have probably gone onto the website, but it's where the city puts out their surveys to get the general feedback from the community. we like to share these surveys as much as we can on our social media and our newsletters, and we encourage you guys to do the same if there's an issue. And one of the surveys you can link into your Facebook groups or into your community newsletter. That usually at least amplifies some of the responses. I don't know how much those responses kind of get pulled into the final decision making, but I do think it's good that the community has had the opportunity to have feedback on an issue. And right now there are 2 surveys that are on the website that are live. So parking minimums, which there will be a community information session at the end of February for people to attend and give verbal feedback. But there's a survey right now. It's a little bit confusing, as many of the city surveys can be, but it's essentially asking, should we have, when you're developing a property, should there be like a minimum mandated number of parking spots or maximum, and what's your opinion on that? So there's that survey, as well there's an accessibility survey. So, you know, giving examples of where people have struggled with accessibility in the city. So, you know, maybe it's like not being able to get into a building. So that there's those 2 surveys right now on the website. And there'll be some more coming soon. So the Climate Emergency Action Plan is going to be going to the SPPC Council, the Strategic Priorities Committee, and that's going to be happening on February 8th. So that's coming up really quick. And they'll be posting some surveys on this website, as well as doing some info sessions. There's also the Master Mobility Strategy, which we do have some Transportation Advisory Committee members on the call tonight, and they'll probably be able to talk more about what's coming for that. And then the multi-year budget process will get started next year. So again, some things to keep your eye on. They're bigger than just a survey, but they will show up on that page. Another thing we like to keep our eye on at the League is public notices and planning notices. So we do occasionally get the notification from the city when there's different planning notices being sent out to communities. Usually I don't know how often, like there's a website you can go to that's right there where you can see the public notice listed. I, again, don't find it super easy to navigate as a resident. It's hard to kind of find ones that are specific to maybe your area, but you will notice in the photo, if a planning notice is going out in your area for an application, they have updated the signage, which I think is much better than it used to be. And folks who have seen those signs in the past will probably agree. But now it has a photo, it gives you like the parcel lot, it gives you an example of what the use will be. And then it gives you the file number and then somebody to call. So I've done this in my neighborhood. This is in my neighborhood. This was a fairly contentious development project that's going up near the coves. And I was able to call the planner and say like, okay, what stage is it at? How much feedback can we have? Where, you know, what would be most impactful to share? And this one was actually really good to talk to the planner because this one actually had been appealed already and gone to the provincial tribunal and then been sent back. So she, you know, explained there's not too much you can do because it's already been approved generally by the province. So here's what, you know, generally you could comment on. And I find city staff generally want to help you and will help you understand what you can do. So there is, those are both on the website. And then again, in your neighborhood, if you see these signs, I usually just take a picture and look it up online after. And then you can either submit a written communication for the PPM that councillors will see. And then we always encourage people to speak because, you know, councillors get a lot in their packages, and we encourage people to speak because then it's for sure in front of their eyes, and you could reference the letter you submitted at the PPM when you're speaking. And again, I've done that in the past, and it seems to be fairly effective, and usually gets a bit more media traction too, because there's some written words to go along with the presentation. Most of those PPMs are happening virtually right now, although they have had, and I think they still have, in the, you're able to go in person at City Hall if you are more comfortable doing that. And then again, larger public participation meetings. This photo is from the last multi-year budget process, and I loved it because the entire gallery was packed for all the PPMs they had, and they actually had to add a couple PPMs just because there's so much interest. So that's just to show council usually notices when the galleries are packed, and really that kind of delivers a message. And at that one, I'd say about 50% of the people who spoke talked about climate change. So that became kind of a really crucial thing for people for council to think about. So PPMs are still happening. You do have to register. So you can register by calling the number or emailing, and we'll send out these slides so you have access to this. and you have to indicate which PPM you want to attend. And again, you can also submit written communications prior, and those will make it onto the agenda. So those are really good. And those are really good too if you can share with your members, so more than just one person is speaking. Submitting a petition. I've actually never done this, but I have seen it done successfully, and it usually has a good impact because it's a huge collection of signatures. Again, the city's website outlines how you can submit it, but you can either submit it to standing committee or council, though the clerks actually will decide which one it is more relevant to go to. And you can also ask for delegate status at a standing committee to speak to it. It has to be approved though. So, and they're not always approved. So that's like not a guaranteed way to do it. But that way, if you submit it, you can also speak to the petition results. And they actually have a clause where you can't have any obscene language in the petition. Otherwise it will get rejected entirely. So again, there's some people on the call I know tonight who have done petitions and who know more about it. So maybe when we go into breakout rooms, they can talk about it. But I have seen these have a nice meaningful impact. And the most recent one I can think of is the Blackfriars Bridge. And that got a lot of media traction. So petitions, I think, are still relevant, still doing their work. And I'm almost done. I just, again, high level of different ways to make some strategies, but advisory committees, of course, we've been talking with you guys a lot about them. There's been lots of changes and suggested changes in the last year. Laura, who's on the call, has been following them avidly. So most of this information I get from Laura. So thank you, because it also is, again, difficult to find because they're on what are they called? The governance working group calls. But they are condensing the 14 current committees likely to 9, but I only actually count 8. So I think they're actually going to condense them to 8, but that 9 was what was getting quoted in the media. I've sat on one of them before. I sat on the Agriculture Advisory Committee for 4 years. It was a really good way to learn about City Hall. We only met 5 times a year, so it wasn't as active as some of these other committees, but I found like learning about zoning changes and who to talk to, again, who to talk to in planning was really helpful for my understanding of how City Hall worked. So I encourage people to apply, and they'll be opening applications sometime in 2022 for some of these newer amalgamated committees. But you can see they have the community safety one and London planning, both are legally required. The planning one is kind of amalgamating the heritage and the agricultural committee. Ecological, so EPAC is sticking around. I think they're gonna have a different name. Animal welfare, diversity, inclusion. The environmental stewardship and action is combining the advisory committee for the environment and the trees committee. And then the transportation group is going to be combining, I think, the current transportation advisory committee and cycling. And then they did make a motion most recently to reintroduce housing because they had housing, but then it didn't make the news list. And then a bunch of community members spoke up and said, no, we should really have a housing committee given the housing crisis. So those are going to be probably the ones that they're landed on, but they haven't actually done the final approval process yet for that. So I would encourage anyone on this call to apply to one of those if you're keen, just again, understanding how City Hall works and being able to provide the feedback. It is a good commitment of time, and it is volunteer work, but we love seeing league members on those committees because we get great updates from you guys. Okay, so now this is near the end of what I just want to chat about, but we always say bonus points is hosting a community info session. Again, a bit more work, but if your community is very invested about a specific issue, hosting your own community info session in your neighborhood usually goes a long way because you can host it on your own topic. You can make your own questions. You can invite, say, staff and counselors to hear your feedback. So you get to kind of control the narrative at these community info sessions. And we encourage you to take photos of the attendees and your counselor, post on social media, and even invite the local media to amplify, if you have a specific opinion you're trying to share. We find these sessions to be really helpful. I know, again, Oxford Park, I think you guys have done some of these about some of your street redevelopment. And from my understanding, they are really helpful for the community. So feel free to chat with us a bit about what that looks like. It doesn't have to be too much work. It could just be an hour at a community center where you're talking about the issue. But those, again, super helpful. And when we can gather again in person, just seeing your neighbors over a specific issue is lovely. The other thing we have for you guys, and again, we'll send it out in the minutes, is the league did compile a toolkit of various actions and how to actually do them. So I'll just show you guys, I'll click here really quickly. But it's a document and it has, oh, my internet is unstable. Maybe I won't, oh, it's working. Hopefully this works. But this doc, you do them. So if you want to have a protest and block some streets, there's like, you know, here's how you fill out the permit form and here's the steps that you have to take. So it's like slowly loading. Sorry, guys. My internet's struggling a little. There you go. So you can see like booking process for a parade, march, or walk, street closure, how to do different digital campaigns, what's a neighborhood pod. If you're running for politics, there's some different tips for the different levels, and then navigating City Hall. So speaking at the different committees and how to do that. So we'll send this out, but generally we just were trying to amalgamate all this information into one location, and a lot of it can be found on the city's website. Even with their updated website, a lot of this information is actually still there. So we'll share that as well. And now I'm just going to try and get back to my slide deck, which this is blocking. I wish I could make this go away. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay. The last couple tips. So like I said, in anything that you're going to be doing in any advocacy or any engagement, always have an ask. So bring a one-pager with your request to that counselor or to the council or the committee you're speaking to with the issue, and being very clear and concise. Sometimes like a one-pager with just one ask and a couple statistics, that's all you need. If it's really long, it can get kind of confusing for them. And the more voices, the better. We've always been told that, you know, if they get 30 emails and a bunch of them are from people they've never heard of before, that has a greater impact on the counselor's interest of the issue. And then always follow up, asking if they have any more information, or if they need more information, or if they have any questions. That's a good way to both be a very helpful ally to them in trying to move something along, and also being another kind of reminder, like, hey, you might not have done anything last week, so can you make sure you email that person? And what is an ask? I was saying make sure you have an ask, but I probably should put this earlier. It could be kind of anything. It depends on what you're looking for. But some of the asks that I've had before when I've sat down with the city councilor is like asked to be connected to another ally within the city, whether it's another staff member or another councilor. I've asked, you know, how are you going to vote on this issue? Would you consider voting this way because it's, you know, good for the community or good for the environment? I've asked them to write a letter of support and submit it to the committee in advance. Not always successful, but having them, you know, either look it over or sign off on it or even write their own. I've asked them to move a motion on councilor committee floor. So if you have, again, a really specific outcome, if you can work with a councilor to move that outcome forward and give them the language of what the recommendation is that you want. I've done that a couple times. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. And then in general, just having conversation about asking for additional information. Like, here's my issue. How can you help me resolve it? It's not really a specific ask so much as they're helping you, but ideally the counselors or city staff know how to navigate your issue and where to go next. So those are the general asks that I've had in the past. Again, you've probably done a bunch and you might have some other ones to recommend, but those are the ones that generally we've used. All right, now enough from me. I'm going to stop sharing. But those were kind of like the top engagement strategies we've used in the past. And now we're going to go to some polls and some breakout rooms where you guys can chat about ones that you've used that have been successful. The question is, what engagement strategies have you used in the past? And you can select all that apply. So it should pop up on your screen and you can just click, you know, if you've done a survey, spoken at PPM, called or emailed your counselor, met with a counselor, signed or submitted a petition, sat on a city committee. These are just, I want to get a sense of where people have spent their time in the engagement world. So I'll give this a minute or two to go. We just have 2 questions, but good to get a bit of a scan on folks' ability and experience. All right, I'm going to end the poll in maybe 10 seconds. Give you guys 1 whole minute. Ooh. These results looking good. Okay, ending the poll now. So share results. You guys should be able to see that on your screen. So it looks like the most of you have called or emailed a counselor, which is excellent. Again, first way to get a touch point with your counselors, to chat with them. And then complete a city survey, wonderful. And then next would be signing or submitting a petition, and then meeting with a counselor. And then the lowest ones are speaking at a PPM or sitting on a city committee. So I would say maybe that is a goal for this year for folks if they want to, again, time limited and based on your calendars, but maybe a goal for some folks this year is to speak at a PPM, or maybe sign up to sit on a city committee if that inspires you. Awesome, but good work on all the other stuff you guys are already doing. You already, looks like, yeah, 21 out of 25 people are already calling or emailing their counselors. So lots of you are already very actively doing that work. And then the next question, I wanted to just get a sense of what tactics have you actually found to be the most successful? So this is a single choice option. And based on your experience, what has resulted in the result that you wanted? So was it meeting or calling your counselor, speaking at PPM, a digital campaign, so maybe you did social media in your community, hosting an info session, sitting on committee, or other? Because again, this is non-exhaustive. Ooh, some good variety. I'm going to want to know what the others are, so be prepared. All right. Give people another 10 seconds. Some good variety here, though. Okay, ending poll right about now. So it looks like the most successful tactic people have used is meeting, calling, or emailing your counselor. Again, that's wonderful to hear. That is why they're elected. They're supposed to be there to listen and help you guys. And then digital campaigns. And I didn't really talk too much about that because I find there's lots of information online about running digital campaigns, and we can talk more in the breakout rooms about that. But I've also found great success with that because that's, again, mobilizing all those voices in the community. And then other, I'm just curious. Oh, yeah, I agree, Laura. Laura just said that, yeah, we're heading into provincial and municipal elections, and now we've got all these engaged people already doing all this good work. Like your old hats, you can just hop right on it. It's perfect. But other, I'm very curious if you guys put other, if you don't mind, just putting in the chat maybe what other successful tactic you have used that resulted in what you wanted to happen. I'm just very curious. So now that we're done that, we're actually going to hop into some breakout rooms. So folks who are looking to chat or looking to learn more but from other community members, now is your time. So the first breakout question is discussing local issues. Oh, here, let's see. Contacting the media. Yes, that is a good other, getting some good media stories. The first discussion question in the breakout room, though, is discussing current local issues. So it could be in your community, or it could be across London, and finding out how, like, sharing how your community group is addressing it, or what you plan to do, or if you have no plans at all, spitballing with people in your room about, how can we address this? So it could be, again, like a local specific planning issue in your neighborhood, or it could be like the green bin or the parking survey that I mentioned, or housing, like how are we going to improve that? So I'm going to put that question to the chat, and then Indira is going to put people into breakout rooms. Tweet it. Yep, tweet it, city councilor. They're pretty responsive on Twitter. That's a good one too. But Indira, if you could pop people into breakout rooms, and I put the question in the chat. Feel free to be chatty, guys. Share your concepts. You'll be in there for 15 minutes, so lots of opportunity for everybody to share. Thank you all for participating, both in the first section, chatting about what worked, what strategies you've been working on, and then also learning a bit about what's happening in Woodfield. Next month is going to be the Sustainable Development Goals chat and localizing those targets. Pillar and Louise Patricio are doing a lot of work on that, and Marina is going to be moderating. So please sign up for that as well. We'll be sending around some links, and between now and then, I'm just thinking, we'll be sending out our weekly emails. We'll have the board recruitment information, as well as information from this meeting. But otherwise, I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your January week. Stay warm, safe, and sane. Good tips, Sandra. And I do just need to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. So if anyone wants to raise your hand. Sandra, sold. Sorry, Dan, I saw you 1 second too late. Sandra, I'm going to take Sandra's motion. All right. Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope you guys have a pleasant evening. Bye, folks.